All right, we'll now call the school board meeting into session,
and
we'll go into agenda one.
Item one,
And that would be called to order. And agenda item two will be the approval of the agenda.
And board members,
I have a couple
changes
of
here.
I need to read
according to
protocol. First of all, personnel appointments will be added. Item 6.4, appointment of principal Destin Elementary School. And then consent agenda added item 8.43, advertise the public hearing for adoption of the 2018-2019 Code of Student Conduct, Elementary and Secondary, presented by Mr. Andy Johnson, Specialist Student Services, Safe Athletics and Discipline, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. So, board members, I'm motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Walker, second by Mr. Destin. All in favor? The vote is 4-0. At this juncture, we'll move into recognitions, and given the number of folks that we have here tonight, Mr. McInnes and board members, I'm proposing that we move the personnel appointments up ahead of public comment and then move down to public comment. So, recognitions 3.1, recognition of Mr. Jeffrey Rink, Music Director, Northwest Florida Symphony Orchestra, presented by Superintendent Mary Beth Jackson.
I would like to ask Denise McLaughlin if she would join me here. Board, Mr. Jeffrey Rink, Music Director, has served as the conductor of the Northwest Florida Symphony Orchestra since 2007. During his tenure, students from our district have been invited each year to participate in programs such as CATS, Kids at the Symphony, Link Up with Carnegie Hall, 5th grade concerts, and other community programs. Since 2008, nearly 100 youth from our district's elementary, middle, and high schools have attended NFSO concerts via the Kids at the Symphony program, free of charge and as part of the experience to enjoy an onstage visit with a conductor. What an exciting opportunity for our children to see the scale of the orchestra and the inner workings of producing a musical performance. In 2012, the NFSO was the first to bring Carnegie Hall's Link Up program to the region with a free year-long music curriculum and fun classroom activities that culminate in an interactive concert with the symphony at the Maddie Kelly Arts Center. If you've never seen that, it's quite something. Across each year, our elementary music educators use Carnegie's curriculum to prepare their students to sing or play musical selections on a recorder with the orchestra during the Link Up performance. In the past 6 years, approximately 9,500 students have completed at least one of the following performances under Mr. Rink's direction: Orchestra Sings, Orchestra Rocks, Orchestra Moves, or Orchestra Swings. It is a sight to see, an audience full of finely dressed elementary students poised and ready for Mr. Rink's cue to begin singing or playing with the symphony. In addition to CATS and Link Up, Mr. Rink has continued the tradition of inviting 5th grade students to free annual concerts each spring. At these concerts, students have been treated to specialized youth-oriented programming that allows each to experience the beauty and the emotion of music. So, Mr. Rink, we wish to let you know how much we appreciate all that you have done to support music in our district, and wanted to take just a moment at this meeting to publicly thank you and wish you well in your next endeavors. Our students will miss your lively conducting skills, our teachers will miss your musical leadership, and our district will miss your presence in our musical programs. Best of luck to you as you leave our area. And is someone here from them? Would you invite them? Hi, Lynn.
We have this proclamation
Let me step a little closer so that the public can hear. This proclamation is a resolution and tribute commending Jeffrey Rink for his contributions and commitment as a champion of music education. Whereas the Okaloosa County School District recognizes Mr. Jeffrey Rink's assistance and support in sustaining a good working relationship with the Northwest Florida Symphony Orchestra while serving as musical director and conductor, and whereas he has served as a liaison between the Northwest Florida Symphony Orchestra and the Okaloosa County School District to encourage our students and their families' participation in Kids at the Symphony. And whereas he has served as conductor of the Northwest Florida Symphony Orchestra during the link-up with Carnegie Hall performances to create additional educational opportunities for our students. And whereas the Northwest Florida Symphony Orchestra during his tenure has provided free performing arts experiences for our students during educational programs such as fifth grade concerts. And whereas he has been a strong supporter of music education in order to teach students about the importance of performing arts and encourage them to consider its place in their future, now, therefore, be it resolved that the superintendent and school board convey our heartfelt thanks and warmest commendation to a great champion of musical education, Jeffrey Rink. And this is Lynn Feuerbach, the education director with NFSO. Unfortunately, Mr. Rink finished closing on his home last Friday and left the county for his next opportunity, and so he is in Maine.
Yes.
So he wasn't able to be here tonight, so we've sent him the streaming link so that hopefully he's watching and hearing all of these wonderful things that we know are true about him. And I know you have a few remarks that on Jeffrey's behalf.
Absolutely. You are welcome. You are welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome so very much. Thank you, Superintendent Jackson and Mrs. McLaughlin. I'm Lynn Fehrenbach. I'm the Education Director of the NFSO. And thank you very much. And it was a pleasure to accept this on Jeffrey's behalf. I'm going to read to you some words that he had sent to me this morning for the acceptance. So if you'll bear with me, it's very brief, I promise. Dear Superintendent Jackson and members of the Okaloosa County School Board, thank you all so much for recognizing me this evening. The educational initiatives of the NFSO have been the most important achievements of my 11-year tenure as music director. Since 2007, we have continued the tradition of the annual 5th grade concert. In addition, we in 2008 instituted our CATS program, Kids at the Symphony, which enables students along with an accompanying adult to attend any of our concert at the Arts Center for free. Thus far, we have had close to 1,000 students and family members participate in the CATS program. 5 years ago, we began our collaboration with Carnegie Hall through their Link Up program. Close to 10,000 students have participated in this amazing program, which gives them the opportunity to perform with the orchestra from their seats. This could not have happened without the support of the Okaloosa County teachers of music, as well as the superintendent's office and school board members. I would like to especially thank Denise McLaughlin and Melissa Thrush for their support. Finally, the glue that holds this all together is in the guise of Lynn Fehrenbach. She has put in countless hours to make sure that everything goes off without a hitch and at the same time makes me look good. Thank you, Lynn. So thank you, Jeffrey. Again, I thank you all for recognizing me. I will miss working in this community. With warmest wishes, Jeffrey Rink, former music director and conductor, Northwest Florida Symphony. So thank you very much again for the proclamation on his behalf.
Thank you.
And our attorney says we need to adopt this resolution.
Looking for a motion, board members? Second. Motion by Mr. Walker, second by Mr. Bryan. All in favor? Votes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming,
All right, Madam Superintendent, I think you may have some photos, and then you have another recognition.
Yes, I do. Let me make sure I
I
have them
know.
in all
I'm
the
gonna try to
right
squeeze it in.
places.
Thank you. Oh, you're welcome.
Now,
Well, I'm looking at the clock, Superintendent, and I'm looking at my computer time, and we do, yes, ma'am, we do have some public hearings.
okay,
Folks, we are scheduled for some advertised public hearings at 6:15. So, Mr. Attorney, I think I'll go ahead and call those into session, then recess those, and then move forward again with the recognition, Superintendent, okay?
certainly.
So, at this juncture, I will call into session the public hearings. I'll recess those public hearings. I'll call the regular session back into order. And Superintendent, you're back on cue again, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Is Mr. Morello here this evening? Knoxville High School students that are here with us tonight? This is kind of neat, what these kids were able to do, and I'm a big fan, and he knows it. I love this.
So the NHS students, Ian Lovin, Aaron Fisher, Josh Henners, Chris Kelton, Michael Weiss, George Vieira, and Rachel Hyde, these are members of our digital design department at NHS, and their teachers, Mr. Legaretta. So these students took on a project and entered a contest called The Greatest Save, and it's sponsored by Kinder Vision. The mission of the project, I want to read that because I read it today, is to empower children and teens through peer-to-peer education to prevent exploitation of minors, abduction, abuse, cyberbullying, and other very real issues that unfortunately our students need to be made aware of. So the project was to create, direct, produce, and film a public service announcement that addressed one of these issues. The NHS film is called Don't Trust Strangers, and we'd like to play it for you all tonight. We're just going to step here so you can see the screen. I think you guys can see it on your screen. Mr.
We have a
All right, very
TV
good.
right down here, so we're watching.
Oh my God, hey, it's so good to finally. Don't trust strangers.
Come on back outside. So that video was the Region 1 winner and went on to compete against 47 other counties and was eventually named the state winner. And when the representative from Kinder Vision came to talk to Mr. Legaretta and I and present that award, he told me that 3 districts had contacted them about the video to use at their schools when school came back for a school-wide assembly for all of their high school students. I think the word that I would use for that video when they first showed it to me was, I think it was appropriately intense to get the attention of high school students with just some, like I said, some things that they just need to be very aware of. So congratulations and great job to our students and to Mr. Legaretta for the leadership in the digital design program. Thank you, ma'am.
Aaron Fisher, Joshua Heiners, Christopher Kelton. Okay, Ian Lovin, out of the country. George Vieira. Michael Weiss. Everybody's traveling this summer, this thing, and I think that's all. And if you ever ever get a chance to visit this man's classroom and see what these children are capable of doing, it will shock you and astound you. I just want to go and watch, because I can't believe that our high school kids are capable of doing the things they do. Thank you. Thank you for taking these kids to a level that they need to go. We need a picture.
All right, thank you. And board members, as you know, I propose that we go ahead and move to section 6 on the administrative and personnel appointments. And superintendent, you have 4 tonight, so we'll start with number 1. 6.1, appointment of assistant principal 2 at Eglin Elementary School, recommended by the superintendent.
Mr. Chairman and Board, tonight I would like to recommend to you Miss Amy Vest. Amy Vest is a product of the Okaloosa County school system. I love that. Every time I read that, I love it. Her family moved to the area in 1989, and she attended Plough, Ruckle, and Niceville. Amy attended Auburn University, where, oh, I heard that. Where she obtained a bachelor's degree in elementary education and went directly on to the University of Florida to obtain her master's degree in elementary education with a focus on literacy. She has worked in Destin for the past 15 years as a 3rd grade teacher. During her years at Destin, she has served on numerous committees and has held many leadership positions such as a mentor teacher, grade level chair, data team, professional development coordinator, SAC chairperson, and has been a member of the leadership team for the past 4 years. Amy was elected as Destin Elementary's Teacher of the Year 2 years ago. In 2016, she earned her 2nd master's degree from the University of West Florida in educational leadership. Amy currently lives in Destin with her fiance, Scott, and their 4 dogs. Scott works as a civil servant for Eglin Air Force Base. She and Scott will be married this November, so she will have a very busy fall. Yes, you will, dear. She is thrilled to be experiencing these exciting events in her personal and professional life, and is honored to have been chosen to serve the amazing faculty, staff, students, and military and civilian families at Eglin Elementary. Miss Amy Vest, for your...
Let's make it official.
Okay.
Looking for a motion, board members.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Bryant.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. All in favor? Congratulations to those 4 of you.
And if you're here with Amy, just stand up for a few minutes. Girl, my goodness.
I just want to tell the board and Ms. Jackson, the district administrative personnel, and Mr. Samac, thank you for this opportunity. I just wanted to tell you a real quick story. I know you've got 3 more of these to do, but when I started school at Auburn, before I took any education classes, they had us do a pre-teaching experience, and at that time Auburn was on the quarter system, so I didn't start school until September. And my pre-teaching experience, like Ms. Jackson said, I grew up in Okaloosa County, but my first experience on the teacher side of things actually was at Cherokee Elementary about 20 years ago. Miss Pat Shavers, I was in her classroom for 1 or 2 weeks. I think they wanted us, before we took our classes, to make sure we knew what we were getting into. And so I just think it's really special that my first step into administration is also at Eglin, which at that time was Cherokee. I think that's kind of cool. Kind of cool. So I really am excited about this. Once again, thank you so much. I'm honored that I was chosen to do this, and I'm really looking forward to serving the teachers and the students and the families at Eglin Elementary. So thank you.
Congratulations.
Those interviews are. If you read those questions, I'm surprised people don't just throw it down and leave. We're really proud of you. Thank you.
Silver Sands. All right, board members, so now we're moving on to item 6.2. This will be the appointment of the assistant principal 2 at Silver Sands School, recommended by the superintendent for approval.
Board members, Mr. Chair, tonight I'd like to recommend to you Miss Susie Bourgeois. Susie Bourgeois graduated from the University of New Orleans with a bachelor's degree in elementary education and a master's degree in educational leadership. She previously taught kindergarten through 8th grade in Louisiana and Mississippi before moving to Florida in 2011. In Okaloosa County, she was a second grade teacher at Longwood Elementary. And for the past 4 years, she has been a peer evaluator and consulting teacher. She is married to Harold, and they have one son, Cody. Miss Bourgeois.
All right, please come forward. All right, board members, so I'm looking for a motion.
I'll move it.
Motion by Mr. Destin. Second by Mr. Walker. All in favor? The vote is 4-0. Congratulations.
You did
Thank you
good.
so much. Well, Ms. Jackson and the board, thank you so much for your approval. Silver Sands has had such a special place in my heart since I started there 4 years ago as the peer evaluator. The children, if you haven't been to Silver Sands, you need to come see the wonderful things they're doing. So thank you for this opportunity. I promise I won't let you down.
All right, very good. Thank you.
This is the principal there at the school, Mr. John Williams. And if you have, are these your
This is
children?
my mother Betty, my husband Harold, my son's in Colorado.
Okay.
And my 3 nieces, Sophie, Molly, and Carly, my brother-in-law.
Oh, yay! I think, John, this is going to be a wonderful move forward for our kids at Silver Sands. They have needed this for a long time, and I'm so happy that we're able to do this for
Me too.
I really am. If you're here from Silver Sands, would
Or
you
for me?
That's one of the things.
There's all your peer evaluators.
That's it, look at them.
Your buddies back there in the back.
Thanks to Ms. Meek. Thank you so much.
Congratulations again. All right, moving on to item 6.3. This will be the appointment of the assistant principal 2 at Richburg School. Pause for applause. At Richburg School, recommended by the superintendent for approval.
Yes. You know, Richburg's representing here tonight.
I noticed.
All these schools. Just look at these folks and support. Mr. Chairman and Board, I am very pleased to present to you a young lady by the name of Vanessa Harrington. She was born in Alconbury, UK, to military parents, Morris and Bernice Harrington. Vanessa first came to the country in 1991 when her father was stationed at Eglin Air Force Base, where Vanessa would later return as an elementary teacher. Vanessa is a proud graduate of Crestview High School. After serving in active duty in the U.S. Army and spending nearly 15 years working in civilian health care, she began her career in the Okaloosa County School District as a substitute teacher. She later began teaching 3rd grade at Eglin Elementary. School and then transferred to Davidson Middle School, where she taught 6th grade ELA. Vanessa earned a master's degree in educational leadership from Grand Canyon University, where she was also accepted into the Ed Leadership doctoral program. She comes from a family of educators and ed support personnel, which include her mother, Bernice Harrington, at Southside Primary School. In the Okaloosa School District, she has 2 high school students, Vandori Rich and Jawanza Rich, and 1 elementary student, Samia Harrington. Vanessa and her family are very excited to join the team at Richburg and look forward to serving the students, parents, and faculty and staff at their new high school home. Miss Vanessa.
Very good. Thank you, Superintendent. Need a motion, board members?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Bryant.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. All in favor? Votes 4-0. Congratulations.
Miss Principal? And your children? Where is your principal?
She's not. I don't think she's here.
I know her husband. Oh, look at you. Uh-oh, we have a shy one. How precious.
My mom, my 3 children, and my niece.
Oh, this is wonderful. And let me tell you, this lady makes a killer chocolate cake. It's the best and the best. So if you get a chance and she volunteers to do it, by all means accept. And Vanessa, would you like to say something to the board?
Yes. I'm really excited and proud to have this opportunity to serve the county in this capacity. I want you all to know that I was not just your hired personnel, but you adopted in an entire community. I've got a bunch of family and friends in the back that have, been supportive of me since the first day I stepped in as a substitute teacher. So you're welcoming in an entire community into Richburg, and we're not going to let the district down.
Very good. Thank you. Congratulations.
Hand in the air. I know you're going to do a nice job. I have no doubt.
All right, Superintendent, you're on your last one. 6.4. Appointment of Principal, Destin Elementary School, recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Mr. Chairman and Board, this is a young man that I come to you very joyfully bringing to you. I spotted him out several years ago in a classroom, and I said then to him, I have my eye on you, young man. And Mr. Genazo is currently an assistant principal at Choctawhatchee High School and a proud product of the Okaloosa County school system. After landing in Shalimar, Florida in the early 90s as an Air Force dependent, he attended Shalimar Elementary, Meigs Middle School, and graduated from Choctaw in 2003 with his IB diploma. Following high school, Mr. Genazo attended Florida State University, where he received a bachelor's degree in international affairs with a concentration in political science. In 2009, after working in the private sector, Mr. Genazo entered the field of education as a teacher at W.C. Pryor Middle School, where over the course of 5 years had the pleasure of teaching engineering, aviation, U.S. history, meteorology, robots, graphic arts, intro to technology. The man was busy. He also spent his afternoons coaching football, soccer, and baseball during his tenure at Pryor. In 2014, Mr. Genezo completed his master's degree in educational leadership from the University of West Florida and moved into his current role as an assistant principal at Choctaw. While at Choctaw, Mr. Genezo was able to earn his principalship certification, thanks to Ms. Cindy Gates and her program, and has served as both the region director and president-elect for the Florida Assistant Principals Association Board of Directors. Mr. Genezo is married to his beautiful wife, Jenna, and has 3 children. And one of them is ready to get out of here.
I hear him.
Braden is age 10, Kate age 7, and I love this, Scarlett, who is 18 months old. Mr. Joey Genezo.
All right, so I'm going to pass the gavel to Mr. Destin, and I'll make the motion for Mr. Genezo to be principal of Destin Elementary. Second by, excuse me, Mr.
There we go. Okay, let's call the vote. 4-0.
4-0.
I'll pass that down.
Congratulations.
Let me start by saying thank you, Ms. Jackson, for your continued leadership and support over these years. I do remember you telling me that 9 years ago. Thank you, honorable board members, for your dedication to this district, the greatest district in the state of Florida. We appreciate you every single day. To all my family, my beautiful wife Jenna, Braden and Kate are up in Ohio with Grandpa, but they know. And I've got Scarlett here, who you've heard a few times. My mom and dad, who always put education first and put that as a priority in our lives. Thank you. We love you. I've got my brother and sister who are both majors in the Air Force, and I appreciate them every single day for their service. And they're always raising the bar for competition between the Genezo siblings. To all my mentors that have gotten me to where I am today, Ms. Gates, Mr. Palmer, Mr. Chambers, Dr. Hale, I've had the blessing of having some great leaders to learn under, and I hope that I can live up to their expectations. To my Choctaw family, I've been at Choctaw. It's Choctaw's home, but Destin is also my home. So thank you to my Choctaw family. I'll miss you greatly. And to my new Destin family, I can't tell you how ecstatic I am to get started, and here we go. It's going to be exciting. So,
It's going to
thank
be
you.
great. And I wanted Cindy, and these are the people who have mentored you through the years. And Dr. Hale told me if I didn't quit stealing principal out of his he was going to do something drastic. So I can't help it. I mean, if they're good, they're good. So if you are here tonight representing Mr. Genezo, just stand up so we can take your Look at this. Oh my goodness. All these pretty babies.
We've got Danny, Jet, Enzo, John Tell, my sister-in-law, brother, sister. We got the whole thing. And Eric.
Get up here. This is a big family. Here, let me just get behind. There we go. Sorry. All right. Take a couple of very slow.
Joe, I'm giving you the best teachers in the county. You have the best community in the county, and you have the best students in the county, and as well as the best PTO. So what you do with them a month from now, good luck, buddy.
All right, folks, I'm going to do the 2-minute break for dinner recess. All right, we'll call this meeting back into order. I'll recess the regular meeting. We'll move into the public hearings. Board members, you'll need to scroll way down on the agenda. And we're going to move down to 16.1. It's way down. All right, Mr. McInnes, unless you advise me it's necessary, I'm not going to convene and reconvene each one of these. All right, so we'll go ahead and convene 16.1, public hearing of a new job description for Specialist Safe Schools, presented by Ms. Maxey, Specialist, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Is there anyone here tonight for public comment regarding this particular public hearing?
Move it.
Seeing none, motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 4-0. 16.2, public hearing for the adoption of a new job description for Program Director Human Resources, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Is there anyone here tonight to speak to this particular public hearing?
Move it.
Seeing none, motion by Mr. Walker.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 4-0. 16.3, public hearing for the adoption of new school board policy 03-20, physical education program, presented by Mr. Jeff Palmer, Elementary Director, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Is there anyone here tonight to speak to this public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to add that as the board sees, we have added a, if you would, footnote to this policy, simply making a reference to policy 04-13 and 04-14, which are related with exemption and excusal provisions from physical education classes.
All right. Any comments or discussion about that particular matter, board members?
Move it.
Seeing none, hearing none. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 4-0. 16.4. Public hearing for the adoption of a revised school board policy 06-08. Complaints relating to employees, presented by Ms. Lindsay Maxey, Specialist, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Is there anyone here to comment on this particular public hearing tonight?
Move it.
You always beat me. Seeing none, motion by Mr. Walker.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? The vote is 4-0. All right, so that concludes the public hearings, and we'll go back into regular session. Board members, you'll need to scroll way on back up, I believe, to public comment. We have no visitors tonight. 5.1, public comment. We have one individual wishing to speak to the school board tonight. His name is Mr. Stephen Mitchnell from Destin, Florida. Mr. Mitchnell, I think you probably know the guidelines and the rules. You'll have 4 minutes, sir. Mr. Attorney, will you keep time?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Mitchnell.
At the last school board meeting, you were provided 2 binders of information from Mr. Early, which was given to Mr. McInnes and Mr. Mitchell, who were tasked to review, audit the contents, and determine if the school district had the material that was provided and report their findings tonight. Since my remarks tonight are being presented prior to having the opportunity to hear the results of the report, I will have to speak to 2 different scenarios, and I acknowledge they both can't be correct. But again, not knowing the outcome, I have to speak to both possibilities. Scenario 1 is very straightforward and does not require any corrective actions by you because it shows that the information provided Mr. Early was not correct. However, Scenario 2 is more involved, contains several components, and requires corrective actions. Scenario 1, the information contained in the 2 binders provided by Mr. Early to the school board was made up by him and not true. Simply put, Mr. Early's information was false, and as Superintendent Jackson said, simply an allegation that was not true. If this scenario is true, no action by the board or district is required and calls Mr. Early's credibility into question. It's that simple. Scenario 2, the information provided to the school board by Mr. Early was authentic and was in the school district's possession and should have been provided to Mr. Early upon receipt of the public records request, but was not. If this scenario is correct, and it is obviously troubling, and yet is another infraction or violation committed by the school district to add to the already long list of school district scandals. If this scenario is true, and a school district custodian or deputy custodians did in fact fail to provide information to Mr. Early as a result of his public records request, regardless of any excuse while they failed to provide the information, they have possibly violated public records laws that is punishable under Florida state statutes. If this scenario is true, it would then call into question previous public records requests, no record responses, and warrants an audit of all previous public records requests to ensure no other incorrect responses were provided. At the last school board meeting, Superintendent Jackson stated numerous times that information provided Mr. Early were accusations, and 90% of the time, information he provides can't be proven. The superintendent also said, "I don't think we have to jump off a ledge tonight just because an allegation is made." This is not the first time that the superintendent has challenged information that is not consistent with the narrative that we have continued to hear from the school district. As an example, early on, I call your attention to the conflicting statements between Major Arnold Brown and Superintendent Jackson. In that case, just as in the Early case, the superintendent challenges the information as provided and calls into question the credibility of the other side of the issue. In both the Arnold Brown and Gene Early case, specifically conflicting points of view, there can only be one person who is correct and one who is not. Fortunately for all of us here tonight, we'll get to hear from Mr. McGinnis and learn the results of his and Mr. Mitchell's review. If, I repeat, if the information provided by Mr. Early at the last board meeting is true, there is no longer an allegation, and it's actually a statement of fact, which begs the following questions. What follow-up responses and course of action should we now hear from the superintendent? And does the superintendent owe Mr. Early some form of acknowledgement that the information he provided at the last school meeting was in fact correct and not just an allegation? And finally, school board members, if it turns out that the superintendent was, if you will, wrong, and the information provided by Mr. Early was correct and not just an allegation, then I submit to each of you that you can no longer sit there and act like a problem does not exist, or take the posture, if I procrastinate long enough, the problem will go away. The problem does not require law enforcement intervention. It simply requires each of you to discuss the issue and work out a plan of action to correct the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. All right, then we'll go ahead now and move on to item 7. As we've already done the personnel appointments, that would be committee and staff reports. 7.1, 7.2, those were both for information purposes only. And moving forward now to consent agenda. Looking for a motion to approve. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant.
Mr. Chairman, before the vote,
Yes,
may
sir.
I at least announce
Yes,
some
sir.
revisions
Yes, sir.
on those policies?
That might be a good idea.
Thursday's workshop, there were some requests to review some of the policy drafts. We have completed that. We've addressed Ms. Thrush's questions. I just wanted to bring to your attention as to policy 01-06, the only change there was a typographical error that's been corrected. As to policy 12-02, this regards students. We have included the MIS form number in that policy. That's the only revision to that policy. In Chapter 4, the district department charged with technology and MIS decided after the workshop that there were actually 2 policies dealing with technology and students with acceptable use and electronic devices, and they have combined those now into just policy 04-12, which we think will be a more efficient way to manage that policy. The policy 04-13, which is exemption from regular physical education program, there's only been a footnote added there, no other change, just referring you back to the policy that you adopted tonight. The same for 04-14, a footnote added referring you back to the physical education policy for that description. As to policy 04-24, there was a revision made. The lettering was corrected and language was corrected to clarify the insurance claims report filing. As to policy 04-26, a review of that policy indicates that statute 1003.31 provides direction as to supervision at school. Therefore, we're recommending that policy simply be deleted. As to policy 4-40, that's the wireless communication devices policy. That policy is recommended to be deleted because it's been merged with the previous policy that I just discussed. So, Mr. Chairman, those were the revisions to the drafts made following the workshop on Thursday.
Motion still stands.
Board members? Well, all right. Motion by Mr. Walker and looking for a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. All right. Any discussion, board members, about the consent agenda or the revisions as submitted by School Board Attorney McGinnis? Seeing and hearing none, let's call the question. All in favor? Vote passes 4-0. All right, so moving on down now. We'll go to Section 9, Superintendent's Human Resources Recommendations. 9.1 is information only. Deferred Retirement Option Program. We had that presented to us, of course, at the workshop. 9.2, Personnel Recommendations presented by Mr. Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Looking for a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Seeing no discussion, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 4-0. 9.3, Employment Separations presented by Mr. Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. All in favor? The vote's 4-0. 9.4, Employee Transfers presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Instruction and Curriculum, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second. Second, Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 4-0. 9.5, Employees Suspension, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. All in favor? Vote carries 4-0. 9.6, Reinstatement Reimbursement of Sick Leave due to Line of Duty Illness, Injury, Medical Examination, presented by Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
I'll second that one.
Second by Mr. Destin. Seeing no discussion, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 4-0. 9.7, Leave Without Pay, presented by Mr. Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Seeing or hearing no discussion, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 4-0. 9.8, Administrative, Managerial, Professional, Technical Personnel Recommendations for School Year 2018-2019, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 4-0. All right, there are no items moved to discussion. Construction Program Owner's Business, Section 11, Mr. Walker.
Nothing other than the Richburg project's moving along real good. You board members get a chance to get up there, I think you'll be real pleased.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Walker. All right, so moving down now to Section 11, Information Technology Seat Management Contract, 12.1 CACI Task Order Number 2-104 for Security Camera System Additions and DVR at Dustin Elementary School, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Destin, second by Mr. Walker. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 4-0. All right, Mr. Attorney, 13.1, your business, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. One item tonight, the board did ask us to report back to you following the last board meeting after review of the records that Mr. Early had brought to your attention. Mr. Mitchell and I did have an opportunity to go and meet with the Human Resources staff and to physically go through the files there. There were two separate files that had been questioned. One dealt with a matter that is with the Professional Practices Services Division at FDOE. We looked into that file and to the documents Mr. Early had provided, and what we discovered was that, in fact, the district only had possession of the records that had been provided. There were other documents Mr. Early had received from the DOE. Those documents had not been provided from the DOE, all of them, to the district because they contained the for the most part, the complete DOE investigative file. I did speak to staff there, and they confirmed that it is not their standard practice to return all of those files to the district unless they've been requested. And so it did appear to us that the materials we had been provided, and that other materials which we had not provided, the district did not have possession of. They still resided with the DOE in their files there. As to the second file regarding the Stillions investigation matter, we did review that entire investigative file, determined that all of the records that Mr. Early presented to you at the last board meeting that he had received from, I believe, the state attorney's office in a public records request, all of those records are on file with the school district. There were no missing records. We determined then the portions that Mr. Early had not been provided to his public records request, we were able to identify those. We were able to determine that they had actually been provided by the Human Resource Division. They were being redacted at one point, and it was just a matter of not producing those to Mr. Early out of a, if you will, a miscommunication or confusion at the staff level. We didn't determine that there was any intention not to provide them. We did determine that there are no missing records. The district does have the full, complete investigative file, and every document that was in the material Mr. Early presented was identified in our files, so there is no missing document there. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's the results of what we were able to determine from that review.
We'll cut to the chase of the matter, and let's get rid of the attorney talk. And basically, from what you just told us, will this satisfy Mr. Early? I hope it'll satisfy it. What I'm saying, are we now basically, Mr. Attorney, are we answering the questions? Did anyone within the school district deliberately try to hide documents or do something we should not have done? But according to what I think I just heard you tell me, is that we have basically done everything we should have been doing, and that basically what the problems Mr. Early has been having, will this satisfy him?
We met with Mr. Early, Mr. Walker,
Did it satisfy him?
and he indicated to us he accepted the information and said that resolved his questions to us.
And Mr. Hennis, I see you looking at Mr. Early in his direction.
Certainly I am, because confirming that,
Right.
but we did meet with him and he confirmed that for us. We did not find any deliberate action by anybody in the district to not produce the records that we had. It was a portion of record. We did determine that there was a mistake made, and but the main thing I was focused on was, were the records still on file with the district, and in fact they are. There were no missing records.
So basically, is what I'm assuming, after what I've just heard you tell us, is we may have made some errors, but basically nothing was done intentional. The records have been found, they are on record, on file, and we basically have done everything we should have been doing. Does that kind of sum it up?
That's what I found, Mr. Chairman, that and board members, that the records are on file, and there were mistakes made in the delivery of a portion of them to Mr. Early. We've acknowledged that to him, have not tried to hide that fact, and have offered to provide those to him if those were needed.
Okay, well, you board members kind of agree with what I'm asking the question, is I feel like we need to pretty much try to put these things to rest, huh?
Well, I would have one comment, and I agree with the assumption that no one did anything deliberately. However, preservation of the public records and the ability to provide those to the public is a very serious matter for all government entities. It appears that we made a mistake, either through lack of help, and that may well be the problem, or that we just don't have the personnel and perhaps the expertise to handle these records like we need to. That's something we should address, and in my opinion, something we have to address. And the way to fix whatever the problem may be where we don't provide public records, is beyond my expertise, but I would suggest that the school board needs to ask the superintendent to make a recommendation to us on how we can fix this problem where it doesn't happen again, without Mr. Early bringing this to our attention, the statement that the records were not on file would have stood, and that's incorrect. So we need to come up with a system that's more competent, better, and when people ask for a public record, we need to know with absolute certainty that it is in fact here and that we in fact have provided it. So I'll make a motion that we're directing the city attorney and the school board attorney and Ms. Jackson to come back with a recommendation to us on how we can make this system function better, and we need to go in that direction.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Destin, second by Mr. Walker. Any discussion? Not seeing any, let's vote. All in favor? Vote carries 4-0. Anything else on that matter, Mr. McInnes, or any other business?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, Madam Superintendent, coming your way. I know you have some out-of-state field trip requests, but you may have some other items as well.
And just to talk about Mr. Destin's question about do we have enough help? The myriad of records requests we've had from Mr. Early alone. Here are the 575 pages of emails that he has sent to you, and people are asking us for this documentation. And so Eric has to try to pull all of this, but that's not the most important thing. Someone has to redact it. If it's going to the paper, if it's going wherever, then Eric has to sit down with Jeff and mark out every name or anything. Thousands and thousands of dollars have been spent on just the records request alone from Mr. Early, and it has been staggering. I think the last count was 29 that we've had from Mr. Early. 28 from Mr. Early. So I don't disagree with you. We may need to hire someone to assist Eric, but it can't just be someone that doesn't understand what needs to be redacted, what needs to be struck from the records that we cannot produce for them. So I don't disagree with you on that, and I think that's something that we will look into. But when you have this many sent to the board alone by a single individual, can you imagine going through hundreds and hundreds of pages?
And I understand the problem. However, the law does not allow us to not do it because of the volume.
Well, no, it doesn't, and I'm not saying that.
Yep.
But what I am saying is, you know, there was an interesting article in the paper, I don't know if you read it, about records request not too long ago. It was very interesting to me because they talked about, you know, the people who ask for records to truly get to truth and to truly try to figure out what is going on. And then there was a portion in there that was very interesting to me about all the people that just ask for the records so that they can go through them and see if they can find anything. And they were talking about how difficult that is. There's a couple of counties, I believe, that are really going through a difficult time. And you're right, I don't think we have enough staff to do this. Eric does the very best he can, but he's only one person. So we will definitely look into that for you.
Superintendent, I'm sorry.
Yes, yes,
I was just
sir.
saying, as we go into the budget process,
Sir,
now's the time.
sir.
As we're moving into the budget
Absolutely.
process, now's the time.
And we'll note that, Steve, if you would note that
That's
for me so I don't forget it.
And I don't know how in the world it is, Mr. Mitchell, that you try to keep up with all these different record requests, and of course not just in the case we're talking about. I mean, you get them from a myriad of sources,
goodness.
including the state's attorney. And so when, I mean, there must literally be thousands of them. And I guess the thing, not being involved in your field and me not being an expert at what you do, I don't think that you are necessarily the repository of all of these records. These records are not all at your fingertips. In fact, they may be dispersed throughout the entire school district at multiple locations. And so when it comes time for you to answer a records request, how is it that you do that if you don't have all these records at your fingertips?
most records are not at my fingertips. The records that we have within our own department, that's data that we can generate through the student system or the finance system.
Or emails.
That data is stuff that we have. Emails is the other piece that we have control of. Everything else, human resources information, hiring, all the stuff that goes along with that piece, that's all housed in different departments. I have a myriad of contacts in all of the different departments, so that when a records request comes in, I go, you know what? This goes to Rita. Right. This goes to Jeff.
Right.
This goes to Vince. We get a lot of purchasing requests. This goes to Vince. That's the way it goes. And then I have to wait for their responses. And one of the things.
And if they tell you they don't have it,
then we don't have it.
Right.
One of the things that we are pushing forward, and you will probably see, I'm hoping to get all the contract information worked out for the next meeting, is the new software package to track records requests.
Okay.
It'll go to a web-based system. You can go online, put in whatever you want for a records request. It'll come in. But the nice part about that is it gives me a tracking system to go, you know what? I've given this to Vince. I've given this to whoever, and I need to get it back. Where are my files? And so it gives me a nice tool to which to go through and see what's out there, what I'm waiting on, what I can produce, and get it back to them as quickly as possible.
But at the end of the day, you still depend on other people to give you the answer about what they have.
That's correct, about 85% of the time.
Well, you know, what's amazing is in 1965, 66, you know, technology is so wonderful. You know, we had,
I know where this is going.
1965, 66, we had 33,000 kids. We had over 5,000 employees. And to make payroll, and you did it by hand, that means the superintendent and the chairman, each one had to sign each paycheck. We ended up having to deal with finance, technology, and everything, all the records. And we had a total at the county district at that time of 22 people. Now we have 252 people, and yet, you know, it's so wonderful, the fact that I can remember when we went into the computer business, that one of our individuals used to call and ask him a little simple question. I used to get answered by yes or no. And then I quit calling him because he started sending me 4 or 5 boxes every time I asked him a question. And so, you know, it's unreal that we can't go back to teaching and teaching kids because we have to keep up with all the computers and the records. And it's unbelievable that, can you imagine that when we used to have more kids than we have now, more employees, and we actually signed the paychecks by hand, and we had less than 40 people working, doing all of that work, and now we have almost 300, and yet we can't keep up. And the problem Miss Jackson has is when we say give her more help, the problem is that we're looking very strongly, and I'm probably going to fix to make some recommendations to have less help because we don't have any money. And that's all I'll say.
I can tell you, board members, that prior to this school year, the previous school years, we were averaging about 2 to 3 records requests per month. We did 200 just from September to December of this year alone.
Chairman, I'd have just one ending comment. And I understand the volume and the difficulty of doing it. I've kept up with public records law and cases throughout Florida. The sanctions contained in the public records legislation are quite severe. Some government entities south of us have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines put on them by the court system. Luckily, no one has tried to do that to us yet. We need to get to the position where they can't because we've given it to them. So, yeah, I know we're short of money, but this one could cost us far more in the long run than in whatever help Eric needs.
And Eric came to me and he said, Miss Jackson, the records are here. And he was very upset that maybe he didn't know that that was not contained in this or that, and he felt horrible because I don't touch records requests. They go directly to the attorney and to Mr. Mitchell, and Eric is one of the most diligent people in trying to make sure he's covering this. But when you get thousands and thousands of pieces of paper to look at and redact, it is very, very difficult. So I commend him and his little staff over there, but I don't know if we'll find someone who wants to take on that task, but we'll try. We'll certainly try.
Well, cut us a little slack when we realize what's happening to the federal government. We sure don't want to take after them, but where we have a few $1,000s and maybe 100,000 to deal with, they got billions and can't seem to keep up with their records.
No, sir. No, sir. I do have one more thing,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman.
May I add one thing to that
Yes.
conversation
Sure.
on records? Two things I want to clarify. First, I want to make it clear that the records that Mr. Early did not receive, we didn't determine in our conversations that it had any bearing on who had made the request. It was not that Mr. Early had made the request or anybody
Exactly.
else had made the request. And secondly, I want to back up what the superintendent said. In our meeting with Mr. Early, Mr. Mitchell was very honest and candid with Mr. Early and acknowledged the mistake that had been made and has not tried to hide that in any way. And I know Mr. Early would agree. Mr. Mitchell was very forthcoming with that situation. So
Yes, he was.
that's all I wanted to add, Mr. Chairman.
One last thing from the sheriff. He and I have been talking quite a bit about the Guardian program that several districts are choosing to go to in part or wholly. We're very fortunate to have the best trained deputy sheriff SRO program in the state and the nation. We believe that through our contract negotiations, that will be coming very quickly. I'm always used to looking at Rita over there to make sure she's sitting there, but
It'll be on the next agenda.
it'll be on the next agenda. We have a very, very excellent relationship with the Sheriff's Department. They take care of our schools and they help us. A Guardian program at this time for us doesn't necessarily seem feasible because we already have an excellent program. I did check with all of our surrounding folks up here in the Panhandle. Escambia will not be using the Guardian program. Santa Rosa will not be using the Guardian program. Walton is looking at having their SROs and the possibility of having an auxiliary force to help with additional things that might come up. Bay County has their own police force within their school district. So the sheriff and I feels very strongly that we have a good thing going, and there's no point in messing with it at this time or changing it. That was it.
So
right,
you're recommending we do not participate in the Guardian program, that we strictly go with the SRO
Yes, sir.
program we currently have,
Yes, sir.
even though you can do one or the other or both.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And just to follow up on that just for a minute, you know, I guess the first thing I would say, Mr. McInnes, you and I talked about this, is that I have great reservation about talking regarding the security measures that we may choose or may not choose to employ in this school district, particularly that one. But in any case, since we've done that, I guess the question would be, at some later juncture, should the sheriff decide that he wishes to implement such a program, would he be able to do so?
Yes, sir. It's my understanding that certainly could happen.
Exactly.
But now funds, I'll explain to the chairman about how the funds work. Now that needs to be explained to you, Mr. Chairman.
I've read the law, but go ahead.
Well, it's an optional program. I mean, you either can, it can be volunteer, but there are districts, the main district doing it, I think, is paying those persons right now, and so that's not a financially feasible option.
Training component required.
The training component is large, and the potential liability on the persons
But
is
the reason,
a concern.
if you commit, and I support the superintendent's recommendation that we stay with our current program, but once you commit to that program and you commit all your money, then you cannot go back during that fiscal year because you have now given all your money to the resource SRO program, and you don't have the money to pay for the Guardian program unless they do it all voluntarily. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
As long as we understand that the sheriff has that latitude
Yes, sir.
at a
Yes, he
later
does.
juncture, then I don't think that we're necessarily revealing any security issues associated with our schools by making such a public declaration.
No.
All right, anything else,
Well, before we
Superintendent?
move on now, what do we need to do, Mr. Attorney? I support what the superintendent has recommended, so
I
that
think
we
the
need
only-
to take action.
No, sir, it was information for you that the sheriff needs to send a letter to DOE, and unless there's objection by the board members, that's what he would intend to do.
In other words, basically, we agree tonight, we don't have to take no action.
Correct.
So we don't have any objection that I can tell here tonight?
Only with discussing it.
Okay.
All right, anything else?
That was all, sir.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Wanted me to make sure
All right,
that-
Mr. Walker, you have
The
anything?
only thing is, I want everyone to know that our finance officer's father died early this morning, and that's the reason she's not here, and just, want all of us to be thinking of Rita, and she's had a real tough time. Her mother passed away fairly recently, and now her dad, but just really, really very concerned, and I did talk to her today, and want all of you board members and people in the district to know that this happened, and let's all be thinking about Rita and her father passing away.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. All right, Mr. Destin.
Nothing tonight, Chairman.
Mr. Bryant?
Just one thing, y'all did get a flyer from about the pre-K open house. About a month ago, we had some concerned parents that came to the school board meeting to address the issue of the pre-K program in the central zone. And I think it's a testament to especially the one parent here. She's really embraced it.
Yes,
She's the one that's kind of got this word going out about the open house. So I know she's invited all of us board members, but the general public in that area that might have kids going into pre-K in the future, this would be a good chance for them to come and take a look at the program that's down there.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bryant. All right, so how about it? Staff, anything such as it is today?
Marcus is in Orlando. Nick is with his son at something he had to go to with him, and then Rita, of course, is indisposed. So we were
Understand.
slim tonight.
I see that.
We asked Cindy to come up there and sit, so it wouldn't
Yeah, we
look
want to
so-
fill the seats.
wouldn't look so sparse.
All right, well, this is anything else, Mr. Attorney?
No, sir.
We're going to go ahead and we'll close this meeting.
See you later.
Yep.